panel, we're going to take a broader look at the problem. We're going to hear from Derica Mearns, the Executive Director of Working Partnerships USA, who's going to discuss a study that was done on this issue, the absence of earned sick leave here in San Jose. The second panelist is going to be Jenya Cassidy with California Work and Families Coalition. Are we going to have Jessica Millie, one of the researchers, Skyped in? Yes, we are available for questions. And finally, a business leader who is providing paid sick days is going to talk about that decision. Kendrick Can with his company is Unident Dental is going to be here also. So that's our next panel. We'll start off with Derica.
Hello everybody, how are we doing? All right. So I'm going to, first I just want to thank the panelists again. Let's give them a big round of applause. This issue is somewhat of a hidden issue, right? When I first started talking about the issue of earned sick leave with my family, my sister, despite the fact that she's got a college degree and she wants to be a teacher, she's got her master's in teaching, she can't find a full-time job in Portland, Oregon. And when Portland, Oregon took the step last year to have an earned sick leave policy for the first time, she got earned sick days for the very first time on her job. And you know what people don't, I think, realize, because most workers do get some sick days at their job, and so they don't realize how big the problem is. And so what we did at Working Partnerships is partner with the Institute for Women's Policy and Research out of DC to look at what is the extent of the problem in San Jose, the 10th largest city in the country, and who is really impacted. And the data really shows us that. So here's what we know. Well, let me start with just the paper. So we're really grateful to the Institute for Women's Policy and Research, who does these studies across the country, and they really worked with us and our research team to look into the data and look into the, it's data that comes from the American Community Survey, which is the census, and it comes from government sources. So, and it's the most recent data that's available today. Here's the big shocker. 35%, over 1/3 of private sector jobs in San Jose offer not a single hour or day of sick leave. And when we break that down, that means over 136,000 workers here don't get access. So while we know the lack of paid sick days is felt across demographic groups, let's be real about who's impacted. Workers of color are disproportionately impacted by this problem. Hispanic workers are much less likely than other workers across the board to have paid sick days. More than half of Latino workers in San Jose lack access to paid sick days. More than half. So why the disparity? Well, part of the problem has to do with the fact that Latinos are also disproportionately represented in low-wage occupations, and occupations that are frankly behind the curve in terms of raising the floor and having a standard for their workers. So of the top 5 worst offender occupations, those least likely to offer paid sick days, 36% of all Latino workers in San Jose are employed of one of those top 5 offenders occupations. And so that's compared to just 16% of the overall workforce. So let's look at these industries that are most effective. And what's really fascinating is that nearly 80% of the employees working in the food services industry lack a single paid sick day. So, I mean, we heard some of that from our testimony, but these are folks that are in the food service industry. They're cooking, they're providing an essential service, either in a restaurant, in a grocery store, to all of us. And they're, as I think it was a really good point that I think Dominic made, they're contaminating our food and passing it on to us, right? So about half of employees in the accommodation industry, which includes hotels, are not able to take a single paid sick day for themselves or their families. And access to paid sick days varies widely based on the type of occupations people hold. So frankly, occupations that do have frequent contact with the public are much more likely to not have paid sick days for their workers. Across the broad spectrum of occupations in San Jose, lack of sick days varies from 86% of workers not having them in a lot of agricultural industries like farming, fishing, forestry, to only 12% of employees lacking sick days in computer and information science occupations. Employees in the personal care and service occupations, so that's like childcare workers, workers that work in service industries like manicurists, for example, they have similarly low access to sick days. The vast majority, almost 75%, are unable to take a single day. So, 2/3, so now let's look at that by income level, because one of the things that I heard from the testimony as well, it's not just that that workers of color are more likely to not have sick days. It's also that the workers who earn the least and have the most repercussions for taking a day off, because every dollar counts, are also more likely to have no paid days off. 2/3 of full-time year-round workers in the lowest income bracket, which is folks who make $20,000 or less, lack access to sick days. 2/3. And although low-paid workers are more likely to benefit, as I said, they're much, much less likely to be offered it on the job by their employer. And this is in contrast with the low access rates for low-earning workers. Only 14% of workers in the highest earning brackets don't get sick days. So we heard about this, and this will kind of wrap it up. I mean, this is a huge problem. It's a problem I think that most people don't realize the full extent of. And so what would providing earned sick leave do? Well, the first thing it would do is very clearly is create safer workplaces and help with public health, right? Research is super clear that workers with the flu give you the flu. And a recent study found that employers who provide sick days to their employees report fewer occupational injuries than those who don't. And that's because when you're sick, you are more likely to not recognize a hazard, right? And you're more likely to have an accident on the job. Paid sick days policies help reduce the spread of illness in the workplace by getting contagious workers home to rest where they can get better. This is a family issue and a women's issue. Paid sick days policies help parents with their caregiving responsibilities. And research shows that having paid sick days is the primary factor in a parent's decision for whether they stay home or not when their child is sick. And because many children don't have access to affordable sick childcare, sick children are often left at home, or they're sent back to school or to daycare to get others sick, right? And the third thing, this is also about reducing healthcare costs. With our aging population, paid sick days would allow workers to care for the elderly, care for the disabled, and medically fragile relatives, right? This informal care reduces healthcare expenditures by preventing and reducing the need for emergency care visits and nursing homes, services that might be financed by public services like Medicaid or Medi-Cal. Analysis from the National Health Interview Survey has shown that workers with paid sick days are less likely than workers without to utilize hospital emergency departments. And that's even after accounting for variables like age, income, education, and health insurance access. So we're pretty clear and pretty excited both about Assemblymember Gonzalez's really cutting-edge policy to provide for the first time to say, you know what, this is a right. This is not just a public health issue, not just an issue with data. This is part of our values. We believe that if you're sick, you should have the time, not in fear, take care of yourself and your families. And 1 in 3 sick days, 1 in 3 jobs in San Jose without paid sick days is way too many. So I look forward to working with you all on this. Thank you to Evan for being here.
Thank you, Erica. We're going to hear from our next panelist, Jana Cassidy with California Work and Families Coalition.
Francisco is a thriving economy, and it was the first in the country to pass a law that mandated paid sick days, for all workers. So, California is a huge leader on this issue because of San Francisco, so we really want a basic policy in California. 12% of the U.S. workforce is in California. And what we do here, the rest of the country watches. So we really should have this very basic policy in California. As most people know, women paid sick days is a women's issue, even though it affects whole families, because women are actually less likely to have paid sick days than men, even though we may need them even more, because so many households are run by single parents, and single parents are less likely to have paid sick days. And women also make less money, so we even have less money if we took an unpaid day off. My 8-year-old twins are girls, and they know that women make less money than men already, and they're pretty far from being in the workforce. But I eavesdrop when they play Barbies, and one of their Barbies the other day said, "Well, I'm going to work, I make less money than men." I mean, she's how many years off from getting her first job, and she knows this, so, So I feel like, at least she doesn't know about paid sick days yet. So maybe we'll fix that by the time she's working. So the other, in the California Work and Family Coalition, we think a lot of people we know get fired for doing what's right as a parent. If you leave work because your child is sick, you could get fired and you could obviously lose income, and that seems really wrong. It seems like something that we have to fix as a community. So in the coalition, we have a lot of unions, which of course are at the forefront of this issue, but also worker centers, which are non-union workers who are organizing, like our Walmart is a group that's organizing. Even without having a union, they're really fighting back. And we also have family caregivers who've never been in a union or organization in their life, but they really need these issues. And that's a growing group, and it is still women